So first off, let me jump in. Thank you to Vertiv. They were the data center track partner who made this one possible. And just a reminder that the content that's shared here, the trends from the group discussions, they're representing leaders from dozens of companies. The trends are not to be attributed to the track chairs or their companies. They're here to help us read out the content, right, and have a discussion about what they heard. So think of them as the voice of the actual groups that we were meeting with. All right, so joining me for the first panel is Joe, as you saw, Dave Wildman, welcome from New York, and Spas Lasarov from Apple. All right, guys. So let's dive in. We put on the next slide here a few of the bullets that we had as just key themes. But what I wanted to do is get from each of you your thoughts on the session. So Joe, let's start with you. What did you learn? The key trends within this.
Yeah, thank you, Dean. First of all, I want to recognize and thank my co-chairs, Dave Wildman and Spas Lasarov. They did a great job helping to facilitate the data center track. So thank you both, gentlemen. But for me, I think that, I have been reflecting on how important this industry has been. I think we've all realized that, all commerce, all connection, all people interaction that is happening remotely nowadays is happening on the back of data centers. But it really got brought home to me in some of the discussion and some of the polls that we took, about how companies have responded to the pandemic and what people's thoughts were with respect to this. And I think that one of the biggest learnings for me was that none of this Zoom interaction does not happen without data center infrastructure and the network infrastructure that we are all helping to build. And I think the world is starting to gain an appreciation for that. We have often been referred to as kind of the silent industry, right? We're the utility that no one thinks about because it just happens. But I think it's becoming more top of mind. And if I were to project a little bit into the future, I don't know if that's going to be good or bad, because more exposure can often bring more regulation with it. So we all have to continue to focus on the efficiency, the sustainability, the kind of the mandate about building a digital infrastructure that is enabling everyone to gain that same type of equality and parity. And with that, then I think that we're better positioned than ever, as enablers of frankly, of the digital age.
Excellent. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's funny how many people are actually now interested in what we do. Because we used to talk about data centers. I'm like, yeah, okay, it's a building with data. Yeah, okay. Let me explain a little more. So, awesome.
Yeah.
So Dave, give me your insights from this, and feel free to use from the bullets here or your additional insights that you had.
Let me start by saying good morning, actually, to everyone. Spas and Joe were excellent chairpersons that made it all look easy, and thank you to Infrastructure Masons too. So, like the first bullet, or the first two bullets actually relating to COVID, I mean, they're absolutely top of mind for me personally, for my team, for Bloomberg as an organization, and I think for all of us. It's like we are the essential workers. Our people are the essential workers, whether they're technical, like from the most technical person who's working at home, monitoring systems, right through to the folks that show up every day, right? Again, whether they're technical, whether we're talking about the janitorial staff, everybody in between, making sure that these this infrastructure, this backbone of the world is operating. So how do we do this now in a very safe way? We're already a very risk-averse industry. We've already been thinking about resiliency of our equipment and even resiliency of our people to some extent. But this has just thrown a whole new spanner in the works, particularly as it's a global pandemic. We're all having to think about it so differently. So it's like, how do you tackle it? There's no one single solution. It's not just about employing more people. And then employing more people may be a challenge because of perhaps the economic uncertainty, etc. We don't all have heaps of money sitting around to just bring more people on, whether they be temporary or permanent. So then, at the other end, you think about the cleaning. How do we get this to be operationalized in our spaces? We're going to have COVID cases. Like, how do you safely clean a data center or any type of infrastructure facility without putting the equipment at risk, without putting the people at risk, having them still feel safe and want to show up for the next shift? When you have to start quarantining people, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
How many people are you wiping out because you've had an individual case? So those are the things that really have been, bugging us, that we've had relative success with. But again, from the discussions, we know that this is something everybody is challenged with.
Yeah, and I've heard this from so many different companies, right? It's like, how do you shift to this new norm? And it's just but what I'm really proud of within this is that just like any other thing that happens, the industry pivots, and you guys have got new policies, new things. It's just the new challenge that's being faced. But Spas, I want to ask you a specific question, because I remember this came up in here around supply chain diversity. That was a pretty big concern that was across many people. So can you just share a little bit more thoughts on that too?
Sure. First of all, Dean, thank you for pulling us all together. This is really a great event. It was wonderful for me to listen to the experience of our partners across the industry and learn from our mistakes and the procedures that people have implemented to deal with this global pandemic. We have learned a lot of hard lessons with our supply chains across the world. We talked about vendor diversity, and typically we don't think of consumable, for example, things like cables and plugs and memory, things that are relatively simple off-the-shelf components that you can get from multiple suppliers. And when that supply chain dries up for a variety of reasons, whether it's the pandemic or China changing their policy and making their domestic market a priority, what we have learned is that we have to not only look at vendor diversity and supply diversity for distribution channels for these products, but also we need to double click and understand where these products are coming from and where are the original manufacturers. So they're in China, they're in Taiwan. How can we bring some of that manufacturing supply chain to back to the United States? Because we've globalized. We've spent the last 20 years basically globalizing and exporting a lot of this manufacturing processes and supply chains across the world, and we are at the mercy now of that supply chain. And unless you understand where the products are coming from, it's very difficult to maintain business continuity. So. We're taking a hard look at all of our components, all the way down to the component level of each circuit board and each product that we buy across the data center and IT hardware, to understand where these products are coming from and ensure that we can secure that supply to maintain business continuity.
Yeah, and I remember in the threads, I think, Joe, you brought this one up as well. It's like one little component suddenly delays everything. But the message that came across I thought was very interesting is that we've all tried to go back and diversify the supply chain, but we've ended up centralizing so much through one part of the world.
That's
so
exactly
I think the
right.
pandemic.
Now, excuse me, Dean, but I think that was loud and clear in part of our discussion, was that through globalization of the economy, what we've actually wound up with is a lot of centralization of manufacturing that people didn't realize until you go back and you start to look. And there were comments that we had moved server manufacturing from country X to country Y and Z, which is great, and that helped to diversify that. But some of the, as Spas was saying, some of the basic connectors that go onto the motherboards are all from the exact same manufacturer in the exact same country. And so, it's the single points of failure, right? That we as mission critical professionals, we try and engineer out of all of our facilities. And yet you look at this massive supply chain and you realize, wow, there's a lot more single points there than any of us had realized. So I think that it's causing all of us to take a second look at how we're actually diversifying our supply chains for business continuity. And it goes to the aspect of our people as well. That do we have the people that are trained and cross-trained sufficiently to operate facilities under really adverse circumstances, which we've been, I think all of us had great business continuity plans. None of us had great business continuity plans that included a global pandemic. If you have a regional disaster, all of us knew how to deal with that. Something that is happening all over the world at exactly the same time was new ground for all of us. And so, I think that people just responded amazingly quickly.
Yeah, amazing. And by the way, for everybody, we've captured this content. We're doing a very quick summary here within each of these tracks. Joe's going to be joining us for the main panel, just representing data center and additional points in this. And guys, I want to talk for another hour, but we've got 6 of these to get through. So thank you very much. We'll be sharing more content with our members, of course, with the industry as well. So, and again, thank you for your continued leadership and contributions back into our community. It's pretty amazing to have you guys here. So thanks, guys.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Yeah, thanks, Dean.